Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal exciting news for the next 2 weeks from June 30th, 2025. First, the fire at Charlie's pub marked a terrifying turning point for Christina, who had poured her heart into the bar not just as a business but as a sanctuary. The blaze erupted in the dead of night, turning what should have been a quiet evening into a frantic race against time. Christina had stayed late to review invoices, unaware that someone had already tampered with the back entrance and left behind a trail of accelerants. When the flames began to spread, she barely managed to escape through the side door, coughing and disoriented as the building she loved went up in smoke behind her. It was a calculated act of destruction, not an accident. And she knew it the moment she caught a glimpse of someone, vanishing into the shadows outside. While Christina received medical attention and was treated for minor burns and smoke inhalation, the news spread quickly through Port Charles. Molly, still harboring guilt over her tense relationship with Christina, froze in place when she received the call. Her heart dropped as memories of childhood arguments and estranged holidays flooded back, but so did her instincts as a sister. When she learned Christina had survived, she exhaled. But the relief was short-lived. The revelation that the fire was arson struck a deeper fear. Someone had targeted Christina deliberately. Molly struggled to process the thought, realizing just how fragile their family's safety had become, and how quickly resentment could be overtaken by raw fear. Anna and Chase arrived at the crime scene before dawn, stepping over smoldering debris as investigators cordoned off the block. The evidence was stark: burn patterns along the back wall, broken glass near the kitchen exit, and a half-melted gas can discarded in the alley. Anna, whose instincts had never failed her, immediately ruled out coincidence. She questioned firefighters, reviewed early statements, and pressed Chase to pull surveillance from every nearby intersection. The questions she asked were sharp, pointed, and coldly efficient. This wasn't just about property damage. It was a message sent through flames, and someone with intimate knowledge of Christina's routines had orchestrated it. As suspicion mounted, all eyes turned toward Sidwell. He had been too vocal, too confident, and too dismissive of Sonny's power in recent weeks. His animosity toward Sonny's family had not gone unnoticed. And the fire was seen by many as the first open move in a long-simmering battle. Whispers swirled in the corridors of the courthouse, the Metro Court, and even within the police department. No one could prove Sidwell's involvement yet, but the timing and his past threats made him the prime suspect. The community began to take sides, some warning Sonny to tread carefully, others quietly aligning themselves with whoever might emerge victorious from the conflict to come. Alexis's fury exploded when she learned what had happened to her daughter. Though she tried to remain composed, the emotional toll shattered any illusion of calm. Her car tires screeched as she pulled up to Windermere, marching through the halls with the kind of righteous rage only a mother can summon. She confronted anyone who would listen, demanding answers, demanding justice. She made no effort to hide her disgust for anyone who had turned a blind eye or might have benefited from the chaos. The moment was a reawakening for Alexis. A reminder that her legal skills were not her only weapon. Her voice, her reputation, and her sheer determination could still shift the balance of power. Sonny, meanwhile, entered a state of calculated silence. He checked on Christina with genuine concern, holding her hand in the hospital as she rested. But inside, his fury built like pressure beneath a volcano. He did not speak of revenge. He didn't need to. Everyone close to him knew what was coming. Sonny contacted his trusted allies, ordered quiet surveillance, and began tracing every move Sidwell had made in the days leading to the fire. For Sonny, retaliation was not impulsive, it was surgical. There would be no warning, no second chances. Whoever had dared to attack his daughter would learn the cost of crossing a Corinthos. The fire at Charlie's pub was not just an isolated act of violence, it was the first strike in a larger war that would pull in old enemies, awaken long-buried alliances, and leave the very foundation of Port Charles shaking. Christina, scarred but alive, would become a symbol of survival and strength. Her journey from victim to warrior would mirror the city's descent into conflict. And as the smoke cleared, those who had stayed silent would find themselves forced to choose sides. In Port Charles, justice wasn't always found in the courtroom. Sometimes, it rose from the ashes. Second, Tracy had always operated in shadows. But this time her intentions were far less ambiguous and far more dangerous. With Drew increasingly distracted by his own delusions of power and alliances with the wrong people, Tracy saw an opportunity to strike with precision. Rumors surrounding her next move had begun to swirl in hushed tones across the halls of General Hospital and the boardrooms of ELQ. Yet no one was prepared for just how devastating her scheme might become. Behind closed doors, she had begun assembling evidence, financial irregularities, digital correspondence, and whispers of bribery, enough to ruin Drew entirely. And if her plans unfolded the way she intended, this downfall wouldn't just bruise his reputation. It would shatter everything he had rebuilt since his return to Port Charles. While Tracy sharpened her next political dagger, Gio sought comfort in the one person who had begun to truly understand him, Emma. Their connection had deepened in recent weeks, especially after Gio discovered the truth about his parentage and the lies that had defined his childhood. Emma, a quiet but sharp observer of pain, offered a space of empathy that no one else did. As Gio unloaded his fears and confusion, he found himself questioning the world around him, his role in his fractured family, the meaning behind the betrayals, and what he might become without their expectations crushing him. But unknown to Gio, their bond was being watched, and not everyone wanted it to flourish in peace. Meanwhile, Jocelyn found herself cornered by a new wave of pressure. Jack Brennan, having re-established his foothold in her life through charm, secrecy, and veiled manipulation, now tightened the leash. He imposed new boundaries that were less about protection and more about control, restricting her movements, access to certain individuals, and information he deemed too dangerous for her to know. Yet Jocelyn wasn't as docile as Brennan believed. She had been quietly collecting intel of her own, and something about Professor Dalton's cryptic behavior had alarmed her. She knew Dalton's connection to Brennan ran deeper than they let on. And she was prepared to reveal what she'd uncovered, even if it placed her squarely in the crosshairs of men who specialized in retaliation. As Dante finally reconnected with Jason, the gravity of the situation took center stage. They were no longer dealing with hypotheticals. Christina's near-death experience had changed everything. With threats becoming increasingly personal and tactical, both men were forced to confront their own vulnerabilities as fathers. Rocco and Danny had become targets not because of who they were, but because of who raised them. The conversation between Dante and Jason shifted from strategic to urgent. They debated surveillance, emergency extraction plans, and whether the kids needed to be moved out of town. What they didn't speak aloud, but both understood, was that any mistake, any hesitation, could lead to the kind of tragedy Port Charles had seen too often. Elsewhere, Trina's sense of unease had evolved into sharp vigilance. The moment she spotted inconsistencies in Kai's behavior, she knew something was off. The quiet glances, the distracted tone, something had shifted. Trina confronted him not with accusation, but with a warning that carried the weight of history. She reminded him that the wrong word to the wrong person could unravel months of work. Curtis and Jacinda were walking a razor-thin line, and any leak could destroy everything they were fighting for. Trina didn't need to say Drew's name aloud, Kai understood. But what she didn't yet know was whether her warning had come too late. As Trina's words settled over Kai like a heavy fog, he found himself at a dangerous crossroads. His loyalty to Trina and his admiration for Curtis had begun to conflict with his own survival instincts. Had he already said too much? There was a moment, brief but significant, when he had hinted at Jacinda's involvement during a tense exchange with Drew, thinking it harmless, thinking Drew too preoccupied to act. But now the weight of that moment returned like a vice around his chest. Should he confess to Trina, admit his betrayal and risk her trust? Or bury the truth deeper and hope the consequences wouldn't surface? His silence would be a gamble, and in Port Charles, gambles like that often ended in disaster. As all these threads tightened, the city seemed to hold its breath. Tracy's trap was set. Drew, unaware of the noose around his legacy, continued his dance with danger. Jocelyn prepared to make a move that could expose a network of corruption. Gio clung to the quiet strength of Emma while unknowingly becoming a pawn in a larger scheme. Jason and Dante moved like ghosts through the city's shadows, preparing for war. Trina braced for fallout. And Kai stood trembling at the precipice of his own ruin, unsure whether to leap or turn back. In Port Charles, every whispered truth came with a cost, and the bill was coming due. Third, Michael had hoped a simple afternoon at the pool would ease the ever-growing anxiety surrounding his custody battle with Willow. With Wiley by his side, he tried to focus on creating a moment of normalcy, a chance to be just a father and son, away from judges, attorneys, and emotionally charged courtrooms. But peace was short-lived. As Wiley slipped momentarily on the slick poolside tiles and tumbled into the shallow end, the sound of the splash and his startled cry ignited panic in Michael. Although the lifeguards acted swiftly and Wiley emerged unharmed, the incident left Michael rattled. His arms tightened around his son afterward, not just out of relief, but from the sheer terror of what could have happened. For Michael, it was a chilling reminder that danger can strike at any moment, especially when your world is already hanging by a thread. The scare at the pool rippled far beyond Michael's immediate fear. Word of the incident traveled quickly, eventually reaching Willow, who arrived at the scene shortly after. She rushed to Wiley's side, her presence immediate and maternal, comforting him with a quiet steadiness Michael could no longer summon. As she knelt by the pool, brushing wet strands of hair from Wiley's face, she was met with Michael's strained silence. He watched the exchange with a storm of conflicting emotions, guilt for pushing Willow away, anger that she had chosen Drew, and deep resentment that her touch still had such a calming effect on their son. The encounter left a sharp ache in both of them, but while Michael turned inward, Willow stood taller. She would not let moments like this be used to question her value as a mother. With the echoes of Independence Day celebrations fading, the following week pushed Willow closer to finalizing her wedding plans with Drew. What had once been a distant concept suddenly demanded urgency. Every decision, every arrangement, every public appearance served a purpose beyond sentiment. This wedding had become a statement, to the judge, to Michael, and perhaps even to herself, that she was stable, committed, and able to provide a reliable home for Wiley and Amelia. She clung to this narrative with resolve, even as private doubts lingered in her heart. Drew, for his part, embraced the role of devoted fiancé, orchestrating every detail with the efficiency of a man who knew his image mattered now more than ever. Yet there was an unspoken desperation to it all. As if both he and Willow were trying to outrun the truth. Despite Willow's determination to see the wedding through, Nina refused to remain on the sidelines. Her warnings had grown louder, her strategies more invasive. She knew that the foundation of Willow and Drew's relationship was built not on love, but necessity, and that alone made it vulnerable. Nina unearthed every shadow from Drew's past she could find, including the one piece of information she believed could bring everything crashing down. Her own romantic entanglement with Drew before Willow re-entered his life. Whether spoken in malice or desperation, Nina's revelation had the power to undermine the integrity of the wedding and expose Willow to a humiliation she might not recover from. Still, Nina hesitated, aware that any strike she made could just as easily backfire. At the same time, Tracy remained a wild card in the shadows. No one could predict when, or if, she might appear. But the very possibility sent ripples of unease through everyone close to the ceremony. Tracy carried with her decades of family secrets, grudges, and a penchant for shattering illusions. If she chose to speak, she could unravel not only Willow's hopes for a peaceful marriage but Drew's fragile credibility as a guardian. Her motivations were never transparent, which made her even more dangerous. Those who had seen her at her worst knew one thing well: if Tracy showed up, it was never just to witness. It was to intervene, to dominate, and to destroy with precision. As the wedding day approached, the atmosphere around Drew and Willow grew tense, almost theatrical. Flowers were ordered, guests notified, and a dress fitted. Yet none of it felt real. The joy was missing, the spontaneity extinguished. Every smile felt forced, every toast rehearsed. Willow, standing before a mirror in her wedding gown, could barely recognize the woman staring back at her, a woman who once believed in fairy tales and now stood preparing for a union forged out of legal strategy and emotional survival. And though Drew stood beside her, offering comfort and support, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were both actors in a play written by circumstance, not love. Ultimately, whether the wedding unfolded without disruption or was torn apart by a last-minute revelation, the emotional cost had already been paid. Willow's heart remained fractured. Michael's bitterness deepened, and Drew clung desperately to a future that seemed increasingly hollow. Wiley, innocent and unaware, continued to smile at both his parents, not realizing the war being waged around him. And somewhere in the background, be it Nina with her truths or Tracy with her timing, the next move was being calculated. In Port Charles, no union existed without a reckoning, and this wedding, no matter how carefully choreographed, would not escape the storm waiting just beyond the veil. Finally, as the heat of July descends upon Port Charles, a long-awaited and shocking return is poised to shake the very foundations of General Hospital. Kelly Thibault, the beloved and fiercely missed actress who once embodied the enigmatic Britt, is set to return, and while her role has not yet been officially confirmed as a reappearance of Britt herself, all signs point to a twist that could rewrite everything we thought we knew. Whether it's a miraculous survival, a clone, or a previously unknown twin, the whispers of Britt's name are echoing louder through the corridors of the hospital and the hidden corners of the city. What's coming isn't just a guest appearance, it's a seismic shift that promises to collide with multiple storylines already simmering toward explosion. The clues to her return may lie not in sentiment, but in science. Jocelyn and Jason have been circling Professor Dalton for weeks, their investigation growing more urgent with each dead-end and coded file. Dalton's connections to biotech experimentation and clandestine lab work have unearthed troubling implications, including whispers of resurrection protocols and identity manipulation. It's in one of these remote lab sites, unlisted, off the grid, and secured by layers of encrypted surveillance, that the first real evidence surfaces. A medical file, bearing only the initial B, attached to a cryogenic program long thought discontinued. Jason, methodical and relentless, immediately recognizes the pattern. Jocelyn, emotionally shaken, begins to wonder if Britt never died at all, or if something even more terrifying is in motion. While Jocelyn immerses herself in the dark maze of Dalton's scientific atrocities, Emma finds herself drifting into a quieter, more insidious trap. Vaughn, whose charm and wounded smile had initially disarmed her, reveals himself to be more than just a passerby with a lost dog. The animal he led her to in the park, the one that had supposedly been abandoned, turns out to be microchipped and registered to an anonymous foundation linked to Dalton's university funding. Vaughn insists it's coincidence, but Emma's instincts begin screaming otherwise. She doesn't know yet whether Vaughn is Dalton's accomplice, a plant, or something worse. But what she does realize is that he was meant to find her, meant to lure her into trusting him, and now that trust may come at a devastating cost. Even as Emma grapples with Vaughn's deception, Dalton's wider operation begins to unravel. Jason and Jocelyn uncover records of medical tests run on unwilling subjects, trials that took place during Britt's final days before her supposed death. Among the reports, a chilling phrase stands out: Subject B, responsive to recombinant therapy. Recovered neural function. Relocation, pending. The implications are horrifying. Was Britt a test subject? Was she revived against her will? And if so, where is she now, and what condition is she in? The more they uncover, the more dangerous it becomes to continue. Yet for Jocelyn, who once looked up to Britt as a reluctant mentor, turning back is not an option. Simultaneously, internal chatter at General Hospital begins to stir. Unfamiliar names appear on scheduling rosters. Medications requisitioned for non-existent patients. And someone has been accessing Britt's old medical files from a remote terminal. Lies, omissions, and unspoken panic start circulating behind clipped conversations in break rooms and hallways. There's a growing sense that someone, something, is coming. Tracy raises an eyebrow. Finn grows tense. Even Elizabeth finds herself questioning why she's being asked to prepare a room in the restricted wing, one used only for high-security cases or those with unusual needs. No one says it aloud. But the silence is filled with Britt's name. All the while, the emotional stakes intensify. If Britt is alive, what has she endured? Who else knew? And what of the life she left behind, the people who mourned her, the lovers who lost her, the enemies who exploited her absence? For Jason, the thought of Britt trapped in a hellish experiment reignites a sense of duty, guilt, and protection. For Jocelyn, it is a call to arms, a mission that suddenly feels personal. And for Emma, who now realizes her own efforts against Dalton may be compromised by Vaughn, it is a chilling confirmation that she's not just being watched, she's being manipulated. The next 2 weeks promise revelations that will reshape Port Charles. As the truth edges closer, and as Kelly Thibault's return draws near, one thing is clear. The story isn't just about resurrection, it's about revenge, reclamation, and reckoning. The past isn't buried. It's waiting in a lab, behind a locked door, breathing slowly, waiting to rise.